the 20th century was marked by a profound existential malaise brought about by the rise of the atomic bomb and its ability to throw the world into a nuclear holocaust at the drop of a hat. The Cold War transcended conventional notions of armed conflict and became a permanent state of tension and caution, where the slightest miscommunication could set off the end of the world as we knew it. When faced with such a morbid, seemingly hopeless existence, what can one do but simply laugh at the absurdity of it all? Enter Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, released during the height of nuclear escalation in 1964 and arguably one of the most defining films of the 20th century. Kubrick was fascinated with the idea of mankind acting as the agent of our own demise through nuclear warfare. Ever the dutiful researcher, he read everything he could find on the subject, eventually finding a story he wanted to tell in Peter George's cautionary novel Red Alert. In securing the film rights, Kubrick and Harris initially planned to create a straight adaptation of George's thriller. However, Harris was at this time beginning to aspire to a directing career of his own, and he amicably ended his partnership with Kubrick during pre-production. Left to his own devices, Kubrick started toying with the idea of transforming the film into a black comedy, finding that acknowledging the utter absurdity inherent in voluntary nuclear warfare actually enhanced the effectiveness of his message. Towards this end, Kubrick brought in noted playwright Terry Southern to fashion his script into satire, in the process creating the eccentric titular character of Dr. Strangelove and giving the film its absurdly long name. Dr. Strangelove boasts one of the most eclectic and talented casts to ever assemble under Kubrick's supervision. Peter Sellers headlines the film in multiple roles, a development caused by studio mandate. Columbia Pictures, rightly or wrongly, attributed the success of Lolita to Sellers playing multiple roles, and decreed Sellers do the same in Dr. Strangelove as a contingent of their financing the film.
It looks like we're in a shooting war.
Hell.
As RAF Captain Mandrake, Sellers channels the requisite fussy airs of a British serviceman, a strained politeness that makes his struggle to avert nuclear holocaust and exercise an absurdity. He also plays United States President Merkin Muffley, basing his physicality off the self-serious affectations of presidential aspirant Adlai Stevenson. However, both characters can't help but be overshadowed by the eccentric mad scientist Dr. Strangelove, who was modeled in the grand tradition of German expressionist cinema. While Sellers would never collaborate again with Kubrick, his work here serves as a fitting send-off to their fruitful partnership. To fill out the rest of his mostly male ensemble, Kubrick turned to actors both old and new. After their successful collaboration in 1956's The Killing, Kubrick was able to lead Sterling Hayden out of retirement to play General Jack Ripper, an all-around alpha male typical of the mid-century military-industrial complex, who suddenly goes rogue and orders a nuclear attack so that the Russians won't steal their precious bodily fluids. Venerated character actor George C. Scott plays the ornery, blustering role of General Buck Turgidson, a man who is so eager to attack the Russians that he dismisses the massive American casualties such an act would create as a small price to pay for ensuring his beloved country's dominance. American actor Slim Pickens plays the role of Major Kong, the pilot of the B-52 speeding towards Russia with its fateful payload. James Earl Jones also appears in the small role of Lieutenant Zog, one of Kong's bombardiers, and the only man on the B-52 to question the validity of their command. Kubrick's films are normally praised more for their technical proficiency than their acting, but Dr. Strangelove's cast more than holds its own against Kubrick's considerable visual flair, bringing it all home with a manic energy unparalleled in even most screwball comedy. The cinematography of Dr. Strangelove finds Kubrick in a transitory phase of his visual style. His aesthetic arguably serves as a bridge between the polished glamour of old Hollywood filmmaking and the rough edges of the new wave, with Dr. Strangelove in a sense becoming a bridge inside of that bridge. While Kubrick and cinematographer Gilbert Taylor shoot Dr. Strangelove on black and white 35mm film and give it a relatively straightforward, polished presentation, the Maverick director peppers the film with experimental, cutting-edge touches, like rack zooms that highlight information inside the B-52 plane, or the chaotic, handheld cinema verite rendering of the Air Force base battle, which predated the style popularized by Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan by nearly 34 years. When working inside a studio set environment, Kubrick favors high-contrast, low-key lighting and compositions that favor depth and minimal camera movement. The striking visual presentation, however, owes less to the cinematography and more to the iconic set design by legendary production designer Ken Adam. Famous for his larger-than-life supervillain lair sets on the James Bond series, Adam proves to be an inspired choice to realize Kubrick's outsized vision of absurd grandiosity. He echoes Kubrick's propensity for depth, designing hard, angular sets like the War Room and General Ripper's office with strong lines that converge onto a singular point. The War Room in particular is an unassailable icon of set design, perfectly reinforcing the character's delusions of grandeur, and in the process becoming one of the most recognizable sets in cinematic history. The idea of Dr. Strangelove as a transitory film in Kubrick's filmography also extends to his treatment of music. While Laurie Johnson is credited as the film's composer, the majority of the music stems from either pre-recorded material or adaptations of pre-existing material. What original score appears does so mainly during the B-52 bomber sequences, but even then it is an appropriation of pre-existing material. The military hymn When Johnny Comes Marching Home is rendered in a mix of snare drums, trumpets, and men humming in low unison that suggests the steady, unstoppable encroach of war. Kubrick's mischievous nature also results in bookending Dr. Strangelove with a pair of cheeky pop songs that make ironic counterpoints to the images they accompany. An instrumental cover of Try a Little Tenderness opens the film under stock footage of jet fighters refueling in mid-air, further emphasizing the sexualized nature of the process while also foreshadowing one of the film's key themes, the idea of sex as a fundamental motivator behind conflict. Kubrick then closes Dr. Strangelove with the mother of all showstoppers, a cataclysmic nuclear war set to Vera Lynn's romantic ballad We'll Meet Again. Only a sense of humor as perverse as Kubrick's could have thought of this juxtaposition of sound and image, and he found it so effective that he would continue to break new ground with this technique for decades to come. While Kubrick never really established a highly identifiable visual style for himself like, say, David Fincher or Wes Anderson, he nonetheless managed to make his stamp on his work using recurring themes, camera techniques, and an overbearing sense of dark irony. In that regard, Dr. Strangelove is the first point in Kubrick's filmography where everything coalesces into what is unmistakably a Kubrick film. Certain storytelling techniques, like the omniscient narrator speaking in the third person, or favoring one-point perspective in his compositions, are present throughout Dr. Strangelove and point to Kubrick's decidedly unique worldview. However, it's in the exploration of the duality of sex and violence that the director's mark is made truly apparent. The film explores the idea of violence as a response that ultimately stems from sexual frustration. All the characters in Dr. Strangelove are sexually frustrated in one fashion or another. General Ripper equates the male orgasm in intercourse with losing his essence. General Buck Turgidson is caught in a distracting, schoolboy-esque affair with his secretary. Dr. Strangelove is obsessed with the morbid idea of playing a central role in repopulating the Earth with a bevy of beautiful women in the aftermath of a nuclear war. Even the pilots in the B-52 are seen ogling Playboy centerfolds as they fly towards their target. The characters' sexual dysfunction bleeds over into their professional lives as leaders of the free world, and the relatively easy access to nukes makes for quick, convenient, and effective bluffs when their fragile egos are threatened. Kubrick was well known for his brilliance at playing chess, and he draws the story of Dr. Strangelove as a game of chess writ large, where we are the pawns, beholden to the whims of our kings and knights who are too involved in their petty affairs to realize that they are actually court jesters instead. Dr. Strangelove was originally supposed to debut to test audiences on a very fateful day, November 22, 1963, the day that President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Naturally, this had a profound effect on such a politically charged film. The biggest casualty was Kubrick's original ending, which would have seen an epic pie fight break out in the War Room, while George C. Scott exclaims that the president has been struck down in his prime after President Muffley takes a pie to the face. The film was delayed until January of 1964, where it was released to critical and commercial acclaim, as well as a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars. As the last black and white film that Kubrick would ever make, Dr. Strangelove's importance, not just to cinema but to 20th century history, cannot be overstated. The Library of Congress presumably felt the same way, selecting it as one of the first films to be inducted into the National Film Registry in 1989. No other film encapsulates the hopeless absurdity of the Cold War as perfectly as Dr. Strangelove, and as long as nuclear weapons continue to exist, squirreled away by the hundreds in hidden silos and ready to launch at the push of a button, Kubrick's blackly comic, cautionary masterpiece will remain as relevant and important as ever.